Hi, I'm Julie. For those who don't know, I'm an actor, writer, artist. Okay, this might be kind of a long intro to this video. How do I explain this? So, when I was 12, I wrote a book series called The Alphas. It's kind of inspired by Pretty Little Liars, Gossip Girl, and Private by Kate Bryan, because those were the books that I was reading at that age, and I was also watching Gossip Girl. I wasn't reading the Gossip Girl books, but I was watching the show Gossip Girl because when I was 12, that was when Gossip Girl was first starting to air, I believe. So I wrote this series of books and they're just on my computer. I never, published them, but I've been always wanting to kind of self-publish them. Yeah, self-publishing is kind of a popular thing, I think, right now among like my generation of young people, I guess. I had this bright idea, which I don't know, I think this is a good idea, but it might not be because I don't know if anybody else has done this, so maybe this is just a bad idea, but you tell me. So, you know how like on YouTube there's a huge gaming community and you can see like people reacting to video games as they play them, like in a little box in the corner? So I kind of want to react to my own book, my own writing, so the content of the video would be like my book and the pages of my book, because the way I formatted my books was that I basically formatted them to look like as if they were already published. So I made like a book cover, I made, chapters, and everything looks like a published book. I just wanted to share that, and I've always been super shy about sharing my work. I don't know, I'm just like a scaredy cat, but I think it's 2020. Maybe this is the year that I be brave enough to let my writing, my 12-year-old writing, my writing that I did as a 12-year-old, be read by the public. If you've seen any of the videos on my YouTube channel before, you might have heard me talk about The Alphas. I kind of talk about it a lot because it's kind of like my baby. I conceptualized it and wrote it when I was 12, and each book has about 500 pages and about 45 to 50 chapters. So if I do self-publish it entirely onto YouTube, which was my idea, my great idea, my genius innovative idea that I thought of, then it would have to be one video per chapter, and I would read it to you kind of like an Audible book. But of course, if you prefer the more intimate, my cat's jingling, if you prefer the more intimate, like reading it by yourself, you can just mute the video and read it by yourself, because I will have the actual pages on the screen, or on the screen of the video, because there's this thing on my laptop called the game bar, so I can just like literally press Windows and G and then I can press record and it starts recording my screen. So I have all of my books as PDF documents on my computer, and so far I've got Prestigious, the first book, Worthy, the second book, the third book is Truth, the fourth book is Guilty. So these are all finished ones that I wrote when I was 12, 13, in my preteen / early teen age. And then I started to write Cautious, which was the fifth book, but I never ended up finishing that. I will finish it eventually. And then I also started writing like a prequel book called History. So yeah, if you're interested, if you like the Gossip Girl, Pretty Little Liars kind of high school mystery, scandal, drama, murder mystery type genre, thriller-ish kind of, but mostly a drama, like Riverdale, I guess, then you might like these books. So my idea for this was basically because, like, my little brother, he's 6 and he loves watching people play video games, and he's obsessed with playing video games himself. He loves watching people play video games. So I thought, there's lots of videos on YouTube of like, fans reacting to like Blackpink music videos or things like that. So this would be kind of like in the same style as that, where like my picture of me or like the video of me would be in the bottom corner of the screen. I also considered like actually publishing these books and revising them and everything, but then I thought, there is something just special about preserving them the way they were, the way that I had written them when I was 12. Like, this is the genuine writing from when I was 12, 13, 14, and like, I probably revised it when I was like 14 or 15 or 16, I don't know. But it was a long time ago, and it's been a long time since I've actually read it myself. My biggest dream is to adapt this novel series, The Alphas, into a TV show, kind of like Pretty Little Liars. So that's what I'm doing. I'm adapting the first novel right now into a screenplay pilot script. I think I blabbed for enough time, you know? I used to love like watching those like movie featurettes at the end of the DVD of the movie where the director has like a director's commentary and it's literally just the director's voice that like voiceovers the entire movie, but it's, you can still hear the sound from the movie, but then it's just like the director kind of talking over everything and explaining what they were thinking as they were shooting the movie. So this is kind of going to be like that as well, because maybe I might like pause my reading to like maybe explain something or something. This is like kind of a crazy idea of mine, and maybe it's not gonna work because it is a little bit impractical technically to have like a YouTube video per chapter of the book, because then I would have like 50 YouTube videos for just one novel, because that's how long my books are. There's like 50 chapters in each book. I just want to give this a try, and I think this could be fun. I'm trying to bring books back. Like, books are the original form of entertainment that humans gravitated to when it came to wanting to hear stories. I just love books, and I loved books ever since I was little. I think maybe putting books onto YouTube and self-publishing them this way might be the future of book reading, because everything's going digital now and people don't really go to the library, or at least my little brother doesn't. Whereas when I was his age, when I was 6, I was always at the library. And also because there's the pandemic right now, so you can't go to the physical library. Yeah, so anyway, with all that said, let's get into it. This is the Alpha's Prestigious, or Prestigious, an Alpha's novel, Prologue Part 1. So I basically just made this cover myself, and I used photos from fashion models that I thought matched the descriptions of how these characters look like in my head. I don't even remember the names of these models now, but I used to like know the names of fashion models by heart because I was so into fashion. I think his name is Jacob Young. I forgot her name exactly. I'll probably put it on the screen. The series is called The Alphas, and then this is the 9th generation of the Alphas, and then A78 is the logo of the Alphas. And I'll explain what the Alphas is, or at least the book will. And the first book is titled Prestigious. So the next page is blank. Okay, it says the story officially started September 13th, 2008. I put the copyright symbol there like, to make it look fancy. And I finished it January 4th, 2009. Revised summer, fall, winter 2010. Revision done officially September 28th, 2011. Actually, I think I was 11. Yeah, I think I was 11 in 2008. 11-year-old me writing novels. Prestigious, a novel. The first 9th generation novel in a series called The Alphas. The 9th generation, first generation to be recorded first generation of the series. No books prior to this one, except the prequel. Well, I mean, chronologically, in terms of events, there's no books prior to this one, besides the prequel. That's, I think, what I was trying to get across. So this is the order of the books. So The Alphas, 9th generation, Prestigious, Worthy, Truth, Guilty. And I put a little quote because I remember books like Pretty Little Liars always had little cute quotes in the beginning. All that glitters is not gold. Prologue Part 1. Finally, here we go. 3 youthful girls stood on their private school campus looking odie, or haughty, I don't know how to say that, and better than all the rest. It was entirely believable. The way their posture and stance was conveyed, it was obvious. They ruled the school, whether it was known or not. Cashmere scarves were wrapped around their necks, and their lips were laced with lipstick from brands like Yves Saint Laurent and MAC. Yet, no one seemed to realize they were only freshmen. Wait, how many beauty pageants did you win? Teal Gallant cried, shaking the new girl's shoulders back and forth. There wasn't a lot that could impress Teal, so her excitement might have been a little exaggerated. It was probably just because Teal had grown up in Brooks Road and hadn't seen many to do with pageants. Teal's latest interrogation victim stuttered, obviously flustered. Snow Elmer had just transferred to Gateway Academy, a prestigious school in the exclusive suburbs of Brooks Road. The city itself was small and mostly populated by picture-perfect families living in mansions. The lawns were all freshly cut and the streets spick and span, while strollers wearing diamond earrings walked their neatly groomed dogs. The whole place was so ideal on the outside that no one could suspect any scandals out of it. The truth was that a lot went on behind the closed antique doors, and Brooks Road had been typed out in a lot of newspapers being delivered to doors all around North America. The only reason Brooks Road still looked so beautiful on the outside was because its residents were so snobbishly intent on making themselves look better than all the rest. Even though the city had received a lot of publicity in the past, and more to come, good and bad, no one had the courage to actually move there. Some people were scared of seeing all the judgmental glares from neighbors, and some simply couldn't afford moving there. Most of the North American population still agreed that Brooks Road seemed to be the most flawless place to ever live and raise kids, despite having heard about all the well-sealed crimes committed there. Only a minority of people were sensible enough to realize how problem-prone the place was, for the majority just saw it as where all the most successful people in the world went to relax, as if relax was anything they'd be doing. Yep, she's a keeper, Leanna Escott agreed, watching Teal. The two girls' eyes locked, and they shared a moment of acknowledgement that they both had advantage over the new girl. Also, that the new girl didn't know what she was in for. I don't get it. What are you guys talking about? Snow Elmer asked, apparently clueless. Shirley Manning suddenly pranced joyfully between Teal and Leanna, and then she looped her arms around the two girls' shoulders like they were all best friends. What a lie. Shirley wasn't even joyful one bit, and she ignored the odd looks given to her from Teal and Leanna because Shirley knew what they were talking about. They were talking about maybe letting Snow Elmer be an alpha, and Shirley wanted a say in it. She had most definitely earned it. Snow had to pass some tests first, though. She had to be approved, and the three girls were her judges. A bleep rang from a cell phone, and Leanna reached into her clutch, taking out hers to check who had texted her. She flipped it out, back when there were flip phones, and began texting back to whoever it was, and Shirley tried to look over her shoulder, but Leanna simply stepped away from her, entirely focused on the screen of her phone. Shirley, trying to hide her frustration, let her arms fall to her sides before crossing them under her chest. She then realized it was no use to keep up on the happy act if Leanna wasn't going to be paying attention. Leanna, after all, was their leader. Run 7 laps around the field, Snow, Leanna ordered, not looking up from her cell phone. Shirley approvingly smiled. That was a good test. What? Snow asked, confused again. It was lunchtime, and they were at the edge of the wide grass field just outside the main school building, worth 1,000 meters per lap. Snow was surrounded by Teal, Shirley, and Leanna, the 3 most popular and most intimidating girls at Gateway Academy. Just do it! Shirley Manning snapped, her face changing to her usual annoyed expression. Teal just rolled her eyes at her frenemy. She had never liked Shirley, and she knew Shirley didn't like her in return. It seemed as though the only person Shirley favored was Leanna, her best friend. Towards the rest of the alpha girls, Shirley was the raging bitch everyone knew her to be, and Teal had a feeling Shirley wasn't about to be kind to Snow either. Ready? Set, go, Teal said, and then pushed Snow towards the road that trailed around the gigantic school field. The green grass field was usually used for sports like lacrosse, field hockey, and soccer. Beyond the field was the meadow for bird watching and the 2 trails around Weller's Lake, along with the forest. The school grounds were way too large and very restricted because of that, with a high security fence surrounding every inch. But the place was too resort-like to feel like a prison. The area was only big to fit all the things students had requested at Gateway Academy's founding, and there was still room for expansion. Still, with all the mansions being built, more than 50% of Brooks Road was trees, and every mansion built just had that much more property. Most people's homes had a forest for a backyard. The school campus was definitely roomy enough for everyone, fitting a jogger's trail around the lake and also a second trail for horse riding. The 2 trails were located in the midst of a huge forest where Gateway holds the annual school-wide Capture the Flag game near the end of each school year. At the very end of the forest, approximately the farthest point in the Gateway school grounds from the main building, was a hiking mountain. On the other side of the main building, though, was the parking lot and place where people got dropped off and picked up. From there was the only entrance and exit, the yellow bar that closed down whenever it hit 10 p.m. There were surveillance cameras all over that area, and if an intruder passes the yellow bar, it's guaranteed to be caught on tape unless someone fiddles with the cameras. But interference with the yellow bar without the staff, parent guardian, guest, or student ID card will alarm the whole school that there is an intruder and police are likely to be called. There are also private property signs every 30 miles on the one road that leads to Gateway Academy. During the day, there are 2 burly men by the yellow bar. The 2 girls watched almost grudgingly as Snow Elmer started to run around the field. Teal almost felt bad for her, seeing that she was having some trouble, which Teal had assumed she would, just by looking at her dolled up face and petite structure. The key word was almost. Teal admitted she could be cold-hearted at times, but not as bad as Shirley. Teal then glanced across the field and saw Isaac Pike strolling about by himself in the distance, apparently on his way back from the meadow. Teal knew Isaac to be an animal person, and there just happened to be rabbits every so often at the meadow. Judging by the camera swinging around his neck, Teal concluded that the meadow was definitely where he had been, since he'd once exclaimed about how beautiful the meadow looked captured on film. Suddenly, Teal noticed Isaac pulling something out from his pocket, and she squinted her eyes to try to get a better look. Without giving up, she lifted her hand to shield the sun from her eyes, and she finally focused in on Isaac. He had both his hands out, and it seemed he was texting. Teal watched until he put his cell phone back into his pocket and then let her arm down, realizing she was probably looking stalkerish. Leanna punched Teal on the arm. "Did you get it on her?" It seemed Leanna had finally finished her text conversation with her mystery person. Teal nodded, rubbing her arm, but refusing to let Leanna's hard punches get to her physically. Her arm muscles were already sore from a lot of heavy weightlifting at the fitness room yesterday, and they stung with pain, but she bit her lip. "Yep," Teal forced out, and peered over at the sign she had to put on Snow when she pushed her forward. "It said, 'I like to run for no reason,' in black Sharpie." Leanna laughed. "Good job." She high-fived Teal. Teal smiled, then looked away, suddenly remembering how she and Leanna were enemies. Ever since the beginning of 9th grade, when they both got into this school, they were rivals, and it was all because the 2 of them were the most powerful girls, not to mention best students, and were both nominated by Gateway's school board to be the new leader of the Alpha Girls. To be an Alpha leader, you must be thought of as the absolute best of the best by anyone who matters, and usually Alpha leaders' family names are familiar with the school board seniors. The ones who get picked are not normally the first ones in their family to attend Gateway. The Alphas are basically the student council of Gateway Academy, and very likely to become leaders and or rulers of whatever they pursue in their futures. They were internationally known as the ideal high school students. The Alphas became doctors, celebrities. Basically, they have bright futures. It's difficult to become an Alpha, and even harder to be elected the leader. Last generation's leader, Heather Campbell, had graduated from Gateway, and she went on to Dartmouth. She took along the other Alphas. They all graduated too. All Alphas must be in the same grade. An Alpha year is the year where the new Alpha selection is to be made at Gateway because the old ones graduated. When the current generation of Alphas graduate, the next Alphas are always the incoming 9th graders of the next year. Hey! Oh my god. Hey! Sorry. The Alphas were made by the school board 2 years after its founding. When it was time for the 9th generation of Alphas to be made, Leanna and Teal were both immediately nominated to be the new Alpha Girls leader by the school board. The process of selection goes like the following. The Gateway Academy School Board gets to choose 3 girls to become the first Alpha Girls. Those girls get to be high Alphas. And in the 9th generation, they were Teal, Leanna, and Shirley. Then the 3 had to get together and pick 4 more girls. So together they picked Mikkel Thurlow, Penelope Flynn, Delaney Joseph, and Callie Rushton. Those 4 girls then had to be approved by the school board and put through the high Alpha girls' little initiation tests. It was sort of like hazing, to see if they were worthy enough to be an Alpha. The school board was unaware of any sort of hazing, though. Same goes for the Alpha boys as well. Leanna and Teal were tied at many things in the vote for who gets to be the Alpha Girls leader in the 9th generation. The voting was made by the students, but Leanna was chosen to be the leader out of this ballot box thing. She had gotten the most votes, and Teal hated her for it. Teal still got to be an Alpha, a very high one of course, but everyone wanted the social status of the leader, and so did she ever since she could remember. Her parents even purposely conceived her and her brother to make sure they would be entering Gateway Academy on an Alpha year, so that they could be Alphas just like her Aunt Melanie, who had gotten all sorts of crazy benefits from being one even back in the 80s. Alpha leaders were legends. Everyone knew the Alpha leaders, and they had all the connections, and all the invites, and all the fame. Teal wanted that. a lot. She was so close. She knew that alpha leaders could only be thrown off their thrones if there were a protest and everyone picked someone else to be the leader, or if the alpha girls leader gave up the crown and passed it to someone else. But also, if the alpha leader lost the ability to be the leader, like if the alpha leader got a disease, or moved, or broke an alpha rule, or got kicked out, or died. Teal, Leanna, and Shirley were still in the 9th grade, otherwise known as the freshman year, and even though they were technically the youngest in Gateway Academy, they were worshipped anyway. Teal had let Leanna reign for most of the freshman year, and she was already sick of it. If Teal were the leader, then stupid Shirley wouldn't even be a high alpha. Most likely, she'd be replaced with Teal's best friend, Mikkel Thurlow. Mikkel was also an alpha, just not a high one. High alphas are obviously the more privileged ones over the rest. Snow ran past the 3 girls, knocking Teal out of her thoughts. She was on her 2nd lap now. Teal's honey brown eyes widened, realizing how distracted she had been throughout all of Snow's 1st lap. There were a few juniors and sophomores gathered by the silver bleachers to the girls' left, and Teal noticed them cupping their hands over their mouths, laughing and pointing at the sign on Snow's back. Success! The whole point of putting that sign on the girl was to attract attention and to entertain. Shirley giggled as she lifted her camera phone up to snatch a picture of the sign on Snow's back. Sending to everyone, she murmured under her breath, and forwarded the picture to all the alphas. Even her murmurs sounded nastily cruel. The 3 girls leaned against the brick wall, watching Snow's humiliation party. I wonder how long it'll take the dumbass to figure out why people are laughing at her. Shirley sighed. I hope she's not one of those dumb blondes. Leanna laughed at Shirley's little remark. Then Leanna glared at Teal for not laughing along. Teal coughed a very fake-sounding huh in reply. Then there was some more awkward silence. Teal hated how it was being with Leanna and Shirley. The 2 could hardly come up with anything worth Teal's time. For this, though, Teal had to be there because the high alpha girls had the ability to choose which girls they wanted to become an alpha, although, really, the alpha leader had the last say. The same rules applied to the boys. In the end, the alpha leader brings their suggestion to the school board, and the school board then either approves or disapproves of it. Speaking of alpha boys, one was now drawing nearer and nearer to Teal, Shirley, and Leanna. Teal noticed his instant crook of a smile emerging from his lips, his brown eyes locking with Leanna's. Teal glanced back at Leanna to confirm that it was her that Isaac Pike was looking at. And it indeed was. Leanna stared back at him, a smile tugging at her lips as well. Teal silently applauded herself in her mind for having had such a brilliant observation. Leanna Eastcott had a thing for Isaac Pike, and vice versa. Isaac was also the current Alpha Boys leader, and so Teal knew that Leanna and Isaac must have a lot of extra time spent alone together, planning all the Alpha's exclusive events. Isaac was so insanely handsome, perhaps the most handsome on campus, or at least the most handsome freshman. Teal smiled though, because at least crushing on him was another thing Leanna and she did not share, and therefore did not have to fight over. To say the least, Teal had someone else on her mind to make her forget how handsome Isaac Pike was. "This is surprisingly boring," Teal announced as a statement, while she watched Snow turn around and try to get the sign off her back. Teal couldn't actually believe that she was trying to help Leanna, help her and Isaac have alone time. But at the back of Teal's mind, she knew she never did anything nice without a good reason. Having a boy on Leanna's mind would distract her from doing a good job as an alpha leader, and the teachers and school board would have to see that sometime. Teal, at least, wasn't as hung up on her boy, or so she liked to think. Besides, there was truth in what she had said. Watching someone getting embarrassed in front of the school population wasn't giving Teal the thrill she usually got for some reason. Teal glanced at Shirley to urge her to go too, and she nodded her head towards Isaac. "I agree, let's ditch," Shirley said. Teal stared at Shirley, surprised that she was actually agreeing for once with Teal. Teal and Shirley walked away from Leanna, who was too busy lighting up Isaac's face with her smile, going off in different directions. Shirley and Teal never hung out together unless forced to. Teal believed their horrible relationship was all Shirley's fault because the damn girl couldn't let go of one little incident where Teal had rejected her to her face in middle school. Shirley hadn't been cool. As Teal entered the Gateway Academy's main building, she heard the bell ring. Teal sighed and went into the washroom, smoothing down her already perfect beige blonde hair. Teal glanced around at the luxury washroom, the walls polished against the hot pink paint, and the toilets surprisingly white. The washrooms of Gateway Academy had been sparkling clean ever since the 7th Alpha generation, when the Alpha Girls leader, Julia Taylor, had announced that her bottom could not sit on plain toilets. Teal was grateful Julia had made a change to the building, making new renovations and making sure everything was clean. Gateway Academy was historical and almost as old as Teal's parents. Teal's mother even went to Gateway. Teal's mother hadn't had the chance to become an alpha simply because she wasn't coming into Gateway as a freshman in the year they chose from the freshmen who got to be an alpha, but her younger sister, Teal's aunt, Melanie, did. So Melanie got to become an alpha, and from what her aunt had told her, Teal's mother had thrown a hissy fit about how unfair it was, knowing that if she had been 2 years younger, she would have undoubtedly become an alpha. Teal didn't blame her mom, though. If Teal had been in her mom's place, she would have been jealous too. Melanie had become the Alpha Girls' leader, too, after that scandal where the former leader, Wendy Jacques, was found to be having an affair with a teacher. Teal took a deep breath and stood at the exit doorway of the girls' washroom, scanning the crowd of students all rushing to various classes in the big building. Her heart sunk as she assumed that they were all in too much of a hurry to part in a path for her like they usually would. She spotted a flash of orange hair that sent her mouth in an automatic grimace. If she could loathe anyone more than Shirley Manning, it had to be Evangeline. The girl had her own posse, and it disgusted Teal that she thought her and her friends could possibly rival the Alphas. The Alphas wasn't just a clique or some secret society, it was a Gateway Academy student leadership group, a group that held the best parties and hosted almost every major event. They were people that students all over North America looked up to, or hated. Either way, they were often, no, always, in the spotlight, whether they were in the local newspapers or smiling on the covers of magazines. Naturally, they were North America's icon high school students. And although Evangeline Jennings wouldn't admit it to Teal herself, Teal knew that deep down it was all Evangeline wanted. All she wanted was to be an alpha, but that was not happening ever as long as Teal attended Gateway Academy. Teal still couldn't let go of her grudges against the girl. They had known each other since elementary school, and Teal remembered clearly in her mind the day Evangeline had stolen her birthday lunch and stepped on it. It wasn't just that either. For 3 nights in the 5th grade, Teal had cried over seeing Evangeline and the guy she liked holding hands. A guy who had long gone, moved to England or somewhere in that range. Mikkel's very strict mother, who was the headmistress of Gateway Academy, had suggested to Teal, Leanna, and Shirley about testing Evangeline to see if she had what it took to be an alpha. In a second, the 3 girls had refused, so that was that. Teal didn't know what exactly had Leanna and Shirley against Evangeline, but having them not like Evangeline either was an advantage. Teal even remembered Shirley and Evangeline being friends in middle school, which was the entire reason why Teal had begun hating Shirley too. Shirley had obviously seen, though, that Teal was becoming much more popular than Evangeline, and Shirley had turned her back on the girl just like that. One day out of the blue, she was asking to sit beside Teal at lunch in Caulfield Hill, the private middle school Teal had went to. Teal made a big show of publicly refusing her request. She didn't need a backstabber for a friend. So then Shirley Manning assumably ran to Leanna Eastcott's side. Leanna Eastcott had gone to a different school, an all-girls school in Coltimore. Teal remembered how unused to boys Leanna had been and her awkward behavior around them when she had first arrived at Gateway, and then thought back to the recent smile that had lit her face upon seeing Isaac. Teal didn't know whether she should feel happy that Leanna had found her first love or not. She smirked and made her way out into the crowd of rich kids and tried to steer clear of brushing by any of their bodies. Teal's Jimmy Choo slingbacks clanked as she stepped onto the polished wooden floor of her history classroom in room 812. Teal smiled pleasantly at George D. Manier, better known as Dr. Manier, the 9th grade history teacher, even though she thoroughly disliked him and he her. Dr. Manier sighed through his nostrils and went back to the smartboard. He didn't speak. Teal continued to smirk, sensing his irritation at just being in her presence. Teal walked down the silent classroom, enjoying herself as people tensed while she passed. When she got to Nash Parnell's desk, he bravely said, "So, do you want to sit in my lap?" causing everyone to turn in their seats to stare at him, including Dr. Manier. Teal rolled her eyes before noticing Dr. Manier flashing his gaze at Nash as a supposed warning signal. Nash didn't appear to have noticed the teacher standing in the classroom, arms crossed, glaring at him. He was simply looking up at Teal, waiting almost politely for a response. Teal opened her mouth, but then realized she, for once, had nothing to say, even though she was used to having suggestive things like that said to her, often by the works of Vance Lawrenson and/or Nash. Vance particularly says things of that nature to every hot girl he meets. Teal pressed her lips together in amazement, mainly at herself for not having immediately come up with a satisfying retort. She assumed she probably wasn't in much of a mood to flirt, after pondering so much about Leanna and her love life. So after what seemed like a very long while, Teal finally shifted her eyes off Nash's mischievous brown eyes and looked ahead of her. Then she turned and glanced around the room full with her peers, who were staring back at her with no shame at all, gobbling up the scene. Teal sighed and patted the side of Nash's desk nonchalantly, trying to regain her posture. other time, she murmured, so quiet she wondered if Nash even heard her. But she was sure that the rest did not, for a few students even strained forward in their chairs trying to see Teal's facial expression. Teal made sure they did not get that chance and quickly walked as quietly as she could with her heels towards an empty desk at the back of the room. It was unfortunate that only one person among the people Teal hung out with was in her class, and that was Nash. But Teal smiled comfortably anyway, knowing that whoever she sat down beside would be excited just for the prospect of being near her. The next day was Saturday, May 27th, and Teal was very excited. Once a month, the Alphas throw a party. And if that month had some special occasions, then they throw more than one, which in fact was a lot of parties. Parties were one of the things the Alphas were known for, mainly for throwing the most extravagant and all-out scandalous ones that get talked about for weeks after. May 27th was set for the members-only, Alphas only, secret campfire party. This year would be its 9th annual since it was first held 9 years back when Gateway had been ruled by the Alpha's 6th generation. Although the ways of the secret campfire party had changed, SCFP. 2 years back, during the Alpha's 8th generation, there had been some difficulties in deactivating Gateway's surveillance cameras, which was traditionally what was done, and what only could be done, in order to sneak into the Gateway grounds and camp overnight in its camp area outside where Pike Inn was being constructed. But of course, the Pike Inn hadn't started construction until 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, and like every year before that, an Alpha sneaked into the headmaster's office and began to follow Bruce Thacker's instructions on how to deactivate Gateway's surveillance cameras. Bruce Thacker had been a part of the Alpha's 6th generation and had written a manual to be passed down through the generations as to keep the secret campfire party alive. The downside was that 2 years ago was when the Alphas finally got caught. While Dixie Duval was tampering with the camera control settings like how she'd previously done for the past 2 years before that, and how past Alphas had managed to slyly do, she got caught by the headmaster and was immediately expelled. It was a shock to everyone in the school, especially the rest of the Alphas who knew Dixie had just sacrificed herself to save them by not telling the headmaster the truth that all the Alphas had planned to break into school grounds, that was why she was trying to deactivate the cameras in the first place. Right after that, the headmaster ordered in replacements for the surveillance cameras of even higher technology and security. Luckily, the headmaster didn't catch sight of Dixie stuffing the manual into her purse while he walked in on her. So Bruce Thacker's manual, although useless to the current Alphas, remained as an important piece to the Alpha's history and was kept in possession of the Alpha leaders. Since the Alphas of 2 years ago didn't want to break the legacy of the SCFP, they chose to hold it at a nearby park in Brooks Road, which contained cabins for overnight stay. In truth, they hadn't been old enough to legally spend the night at the cabins in the park, and so they managed to break and enter, or break in camp, rather. They also tried to mourn the loss of their fellow Alpha, Dixie Duval, but most partied hard even so. And Heather Campbell, a good friend of Dixie's, and last generation's Alpha Girls leader, was so grateful to Dixie that she sneaked into the headmaster's office. And though she couldn't make him undo the expulsion, she knew that Dixie's Alpha ring rightfully belonged to her. See, every Alpha girl who becomes an Alpha gets a silver-banded ring with a diamond-encrusted A on it. On the inside of the band is the Alpha girl's name etched into the ring. It was the same for the Alpha boys, except their rings were just gold bands with an A etched onto it, just like their names. And if an Alpha lost the right to be an Alpha by getting removed or expelled, his or her ring gets taken away and stored in the locked glass cabinet behind the headmaster's desk before getting burned in a fire, like as if the person was never an Alpha. And when Alphas graduate from Gateway Academy, that doesn't mean that they aren't an Alpha anymore. They were announced as an Alpha and never expelled from either the school or the Alphas. So, Alpha graduates got to keep their rings, and yes, they were still Alphas, just not of the current generation. The rings had always been a part of the ceremonial becoming of an Alpha since the start. It was just that the designers changed throughout the years, even though the designs themselves never changed. Gateway Academy still ordered custom-made rings to the previous liking. So Heather Campbell stole the key to the glass cabinet from the headmaster's set of keys kept in his coat pocket, and then retrieved Dixie's ring, which had gotten taken from her once expelled, and returned it to Dixie. It was an honor to have the ring, because just to flash the ring to others in public may get you a discount in certain purchases and other such benefits, though Dixie had to be careful as that no one realized which Alpha she was, that she was indeed in possession of a stolen ring, and that she wasn't technically an Alpha anymore according to the Gateway School Board. For the headmaster had definitely noticed the missing of Dixie Duval's ring in his glass cabinet and had filed it stolen to the police. Nobody confessed any knowledge towards it either. No one should have, since the only people who knew what had happened had been Dixie herself, Heather Campbell, and Camden Gallant. That was simply the only reason Teal even knew about it. Her brother had told her. Her brother, who had been last year's Alpha Boys leader. And as far as Teal knew, no one else in the world knew what happened to Dixie Duval's ring. Most people probably assumed that Dixie Duval had stolen it back. Even the rest of last generation's alphas didn't know the truth. They mostly thought that Dixie deserved having it, if she did, anyway. And there was no way of knowing whether Dixie had her ring or not, because Dixie Duval had vanished off the face of North America after getting expelled from the Gateway Academy, probably so that she could actually use the benefits of her ring without getting recognized as easily in other countries. Heather had bitten her tongue back, letting her alphas think their own versions of what happened to Dixie's ring. Camden only knew what had happened because he helped Heather get the key to the glass cabinet. Anyway, they did the same as CFP at the park the next year, a year ago, and the same break and entering was planned to happen under the 9th generation's guide. Teal Gallant didn't believe the SCFP would ever be able to go back to its original location in the Gateway school grounds because the security was too tight and circumstances too risky, especially since the Pike Inn was now being built right near Gateway's camping area. If anyone were to camp there without permission, a worker of the Pike Inn would be able to tattle on them after seeing them. So she was content with the SCFP being held, now and forever, at Glenstake Regional Park. It was the only way they could keep the tradition alive. So that was a lot of exposition. That's Prologue Part 1. According to how I had written it when I was 11. So yeah, the idea of the Alphas is that it's basically kind of like a student council at this very prestigious school called Gateway Academy. In this world of the Alphas, Gateway Academy is famous internationally, and the Alphas, they're high school students, but they're basically as famous as celebrities. Famous for just being high school students, not having any sort of like, you know, artistic talents like singing like Justin Bieber or something. The reason they're famous is simply because they're alphas at this very exclusive and famous school, and they're famous internationally. So that's how the world of the alphas works. Every 4 years there's a new alpha generation or an alpha cycle. To be able to be an alpha, you have to essentially be born on a leap year, or as they call it in this series, an alpha year. I was born on a leap year, and my younger sister Joyce was also born on a leap year, so that's kind of what inspired that. But essentially you just have to be in the grade of the 9th graders that are incoming after the previous alpha generation has all graduated, because high school has 4 years. The whole idea of having alpha girls and alpha boys is a little bit similar to K-pop. Like there's 8 alpha girls and 8 alpha boys, or at least that's the maximum that you could have in the student council. It's kind of like similar to K-pop in a sense, like K-pop groups. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's kind of how I think of it. There's kind of like an interesting draw to finding a group of girls or a group of boys, kind of like those K-pop groups, and being able to pick your own favorite out of them, or like your own favorite Sailor Scout out of the group of Sailor Scouts in like Sailor Moon. Every time new alphas get selected, it's like the whole entire world internationally is waiting to see who gets picked. So there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of eyes on it in the media. Yes, so I know this video is probably super long. Yeah, I guess that's kind of impractical because it does take so long to read just like one chapter on camera. I still think this is kind of a cool way to self-publish, so I hope you stay tuned for the rest of the novel, and hopefully I'll actually film everything else in the novel, or maybe I'll just keep it as like a sneak peek of the novel, or I don't know. This is all kind of like a new idea in my head too. Thanks for reading with me.